In a world of unimaginable wealth, a poor black waiter named Julian is the target of a cruel joke by a millionaire heiress, Serafina Vance. She snatches a priceless violin from a musician and forces it into his hands, demanding a performance to humiliate him. But she is unaware that Julian, a prodigy with a hidden passion for the instrument, is about to play a melody that will shatter her world and change his forever. He would no longer be a waiter, but a respected musician stepping into the world of art. If you liked the video and subscribe to the channel, let's move on to our story. Enjoy watching. The air in the gilded cage tasted of old money and fresh-cut flowers. It was a suffocating blend of privilege and perfume that Julian breathed in nightly, a stark contrast to the diesel fumes and stale cigarettes of his own neighborhood. As he glided between tables, a phantom of impeccable service, he saw the same cast of characters he had come to know over the past 2 years. The crypto brothers with their aggressive laughter, the society matrons with their surgically tight faces, and the power brokers whose whispers could move markets. They all lived in a world of effortless abundance, a world where the biggest problem was a lukewarm bottle of Merlot or a waiter who failed to anticipate their every whim. Julian was an invisible fixture in this world, a ghost in a pressed black suit, a professional at serving those who barely registered his existence. Tonight, however, felt different. A palpable tension hung in the air, radiating from a corner booth where Serafina Vance held court. Serafina wasn't just wealthy, she was the kind of rich that made other rich people uncomfortable. A titan of real estate, she had a reputation for casual cruelty, her sharp wit a weapon she deployed with surgical precision. She was dining with a small group of sycophants who hung on her every word, their forced laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Julian had the misfortune of serving her table. As he approached with a tray of amuse-bouches, his mind drifted back to a different kind of music, a different kind of room. He remembered the cramped, dusty living room of Mr. Elias, a man whose hands were gnarled with age but held a violin with the tenderness of a father cradling a child. Mr. Elias, with his deep-set, kind eyes and his booming, generous laugh, had seen something in a young Julian that no one else had. He had seen a boy, small and serious, with a hunger for beauty in a world that often seemed devoid of it. The old man's music had been Julian's first love, a revelation that sound could be more than just noise, that it could be a language of the soul. Julian had scraped together every penny of his allowance, working odd jobs, saving birthday money, all for the chance to take lessons at a community center. He practiced in secret, late at night, a cheap, worn-out violin his only confidant. The melody was his sanctuary, a private escape from the harsh realities of his life. Mr. Elias had passed away years ago, leaving Julian with a legacy of love for music and a skill he had kept hidden, a secret jewel he never polished for anyone else. As Julian placed a small, meticulously crafted scallop on Serafina's plate, she stopped him with a single, manicured hand. "Look at him," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "The help is so focused, so serious. You'd think he was solving a problem of global importance, not just balancing a tray." A ripple of nervous laughter spread among her companions. Julian's heart hammered against his ribs. He felt the familiar heat of shame rising in his cheeks, but years of training kicked in. He maintained a neutral expression, his gaze fixed on a point just above her head. "Is everything to your satisfaction, ma'am?" he asked, his voice a smooth, low murmur. "Oh, it's perfect," she replied, a predatory smile on her lips. "In fact, it's so perfect it's boring. I need a little entertainment." Her eyes scanned the opulent dining room, settling on the small stage where a tuxedo-clad violinist was playing a gentle, classical piece. The music, which Julian had always found vaguely irritating in its polished perfection, suddenly stopped as Serafina stood up. She walked directly to the musician, a beautiful young woman with an expression of polite bewilderment. "Excuse me, darling," Serafina purred, her voice carrying across the hushed room. She took the violin from the musician's hands with the casual ease of someone borrowing a handbag. The musician stood frozen, stunned. Serafina returned to her table, holding the priceless instrument aloft like a trophy. She then turned her attention back to Julian, her gaze cold and piercing. The room fell silent. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what new spectacle she would create. The air was thick with anticipation. "Come here, you," she commanded, beckoning Julian with a flick of her wrist. "Stop pretending to be so important. I've seen your type before." Always so eager to please, so desperate to climb out of the mud. I'm going to give you a chance to truly entertain us." Julian's breath hitched. He felt his hands begin to tremble, a deep-seated tremor that had nothing to do with balancing a tray. The memories of Mr. Elias, the nights of secret practice, the quiet joy of making music, all of it flashed through his mind. Serafina held the violin out to him, a cruel grin stretching across her face. "Now you're not just a waiter. You're an artist. Play something for us. Show us what you've got." Julian stood frozen, a statue in the center of the gilded room. All eyes were on him. The violin, a magnificent instrument of polished wood and fine strings, hung in the air between them. The musician stood aghast, the manager was striding quickly across the room, and Serafina Vance waited, her smile a promise of public humiliation. For a moment, Julian was lost, trapped between the memories of his past and the terrifying reality of his present. He felt the weight of every condescending glance, every snide comment, every moment of being unseen. The pressure was immense. The silence was deafening. He had a choice to make, a decision that would either break him or set him free. And in that moment, as Serafina's mocking hand offered him the instrument of his secret passion, Julian felt a profound shift. The shame, the fear, the invisible cloak of servitude, it all began to fall away. In its place, a different feeling took root, a quiet, furious resolve. He looked at the violin not as a tool of ridicule, but as a piece of himself, and he knew what he had to do. With a firm nod, he took the violin from her hand. The violin felt both foreign and familiar in Julian's hands. Its weight was a forgotten comfort, the cool, polished wood a promise of something he had long kept to himself. The room, which moments ago had been a gilded prison of disdain, now felt like a stage. Serafina Vance's cruel smile was a spotlight, and the silence of the patrons was the drum roll before a performance. He could feel the eyes of every person in the room, 100 tiny daggers, 100 different assumptions about the help, and what he was about to do. They expected a fumbling, a screech, the comical struggle of an imposter. They expected him to reinforce the invisible barrier between them and him, to prove his place was not among the artists, but among the servers. But as his fingers found the strings, a quiet calm settled over him. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about Mr. Elias. It was about the calloused hands that had guided his own, the patient voice that had taught him to hear not just the notes, but the story within them. He closed his eyes for a brief moment and heard the old man's words. "The violin isn't something you play, Julian. It's someone you talk to. You tell it your sorrow, you tell it your joy, and it'll sing back your truth." Julian didn't have a piece planned. There was no sheet music, no polished repertoire for a crowd of millionaires. Instead, he simply began to talk to the violin. His fingers, which had spent years memorizing the geography of a fretboard, found their way with effortless grace. He drew the bow across the strings, and the first notes were not the clumsy, awkward sounds they anticipated. They were a slow, deliberate wail, a single mournful cry that filled the cavernous space. It was the sound of his neighborhood at dusk, the lonely song of a distant siren, the echo of a child's forgotten dream. It was a note of pure, unadulterated emotion, and it was devastatingly beautiful. The smirk on Serafina's face evaporated. Her jaw, which had been set in a sneer, went slack. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes widening in disbelief. The waiter, the man she had so casually mocked, was not an imposter. He was a master. The manager, who had been marching toward the scene with a panicked, apologetic expression, stopped dead in his tracks, his hand frozen mid-gesture. The hired violinist, who had watched the whole spectacle with a mix of offense and pity, now looked on with professional awe, her own quiet certainty replaced by a sense of wonder. Julian's music began to swell. The single aching note transformed into a complex tapestry of sound. It was fast-paced and gripping, a story told in staccato rhythms and sweeping arpeggios. It was the frantic, hopeful pulse of a city, the rush of a train leaving a station, the desperate ambition of a young man trying to make a life for himself. He played with a raw, fierce passion that was completely out of place in the sterile, refined atmosphere of the restaurant. His body swayed with the rhythm, his eyes still closed, a world of memories unfolding behind his eyelids. He wasn't in the gilded cage anymore. He was back in Mr. Elias's living room, feeling the worn floorboards under his feet, bathed in the warmth of old music and genuine kindness. He reached a crescendo, a dizzying flurry of notes that seemed to defy the physical limits of the instrument. It was the sound of triumph, a defiant shout against a world that had tried to silence him. The music was a living, breathing thing, an undeniable force that tore through the pretense and artifice of the room. When the final note faded, a single, sustained whisper that hung in the air for a long moment, the silence was absolute. It was a different kind of quiet now, not the silence of expectation, but the silence of shock, of reverence, of a moment so profound it had to be absorbed without a single sound. Julian opened his eyes and looked directly at Serafina Vance. Her face was a mask of stunned disbelief, her carefully constructed world of casual superiority shattered by a simple piece of music. For the first time she wasn't looking at the help. She was looking at Julian, the man, the artist, the violinist. The waiter's secret had been revealed, not as a desperate plea for attention, but as a statement of quiet, undeniable power. The echo of the final note lingered in the air, a ghost of sound that seemed to hold everyone in place. The silence that followed was more profound than any applause could have been. It wasn't the silence of anticipation, but of a shared, collective experience. Julian stood in the center of the room, the violin still in his hands, his head bowed slightly as he caught his breath. He could feel his heart hammering against his ribs, a frantic rhythm that was a stark contrast to the perfect calm that had held him as he played. He slowly opened his eyes and the world rushed back in. The glittering chandeliers, the hushed tables, and Serafina Vance, her face a canvas of disbelief. She was the first to break the silence. She cleared her throat, a small brittle sound that shattered the moment. She tried to arrange her features into a mask of composure, but the effort was visible. "Well," she said, her voice a little too loud, "that was unexpected. Quite a talent you're hiding, boy." The word boy hung in the air, an attempt to reclaim the power she had lost, but it landed flat, devoid of its usual sting. It was the last gasp of a drowning superiority. A murmur began to rise from the tables. It started as whispers, then became a low hum of chatter. People were turning to one another, their faces alive with a mix of shock and admiration. The manager, a portly man named Mr. Davies, finally unfroze. He hurried forward, a frantic, almost reverent look on his face. "Julian," he began, his voice a strained whisper, "that was incredible. My God, where did you learn to play like that?" Before Julian could answer, a hand gently touched his arm. It was the young violinist from the stage, her face glowing with genuine admiration. "That was a masterpiece," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "The emotional depth, the technical skill, it was breathtaking. What was that piece? Was it an original composition?" Her eyes were wide with a performer's reverence, not the polite praise of a patron. Julian looked from her to Mr. Davies, then finally back to Serafina Vance, who was now staring down at her plate, her perfect composure in tatters. "It was just a conversation," Julian said softly, his voice still a little hoarse. He gently handed the priceless violin back to the other musician, who accepted it with the care of someone receiving a sacred relic. A smattering of applause broke out from one of the tables, and then another and another, until the entire restaurant was filled with the sound of clapping. It was a standing ovation for the waiter, the man they had all, just moments before, dismissed as a background player. Julian felt a flush of heat spread through him, not of shame, but of something he hadn't felt in a very long time, validation. The applause felt like the sun after a long winter, a warmth he hadn't realized he was missing. Serafina Vance, unable to bear the spectacle, rose from her table, her face a thundercloud. She threw a few bills onto the table and stormed out without a word, her departure more of a retreat than a grand exit. Her companions, looking utterly bewildered, scrambled to follow her, leaving behind an awkward silence where her cutting remarks had once held sway. Mr. Davies clapped Julian on the shoulder, a little too hard. "Julian, this changes everything," he said, his eyes gleaming with a newfound enthusiasm. "We can't have a talent like that waiting tables. This is an opportunity, my boy. A golden opportunity. We'll have you on the stage, a featured performer. This is the kind of thing that puts a restaurant on the map." Julian felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. The applause was intoxicating, the praise a balm to his soul, but the idea of becoming a fixture, a showpiece for the wealthy, was deeply unsettling. He had just played a song of his own truth, a melody for Mr. Elias, and now it was being repackaged as a marketing ploy. He was no longer just the invisible waiter. Now he was the curious phenomenon, the performing spectacle, the new face of the Gilded Cage's curated experience. He saw the other violinist, the one whose violin he had just returned, smiling at him. Her smile was different from the others. It was a look of shared understanding, a recognition of one artist for another. In that moment, Julian knew he couldn't just walk away from this. He had made his choice when he took the violin from Serafina Vance, and now he had to live with the consequences, both good and bad. The music had set him free, but it had also tethered him to a new kind of cage, one just as gilded as the one he had just defied. The applause died down, but its sound still echoed in Julian's ears. He stood amidst the hushed remnants of the gilded cage, the scent of expensive food replaced by the heady aroma of victory and the faint, sweet smell of polished wood from the violin. The patrons, once a faceless blur of wealth, now regarded him with a new, unsettling intimacy. He felt seen in a way he never had before, and the feeling was both thrilling and deeply unnerving. He was no longer the invisible shadow, but the object of their gaze, the new spectacle. The weight of Mr. Davies's hand on his shoulder felt less like a gesture of praise and more like a claim of ownership. Mr. Davies led him away from the lingering patrons and through a back corridor, the clicking of his shoes on the marble floor the only sound. He ushered Julian into his office, a small, meticulously organized room that smelled of old leather and mints. Julian sat in a plush chair, the contrast between his worn work pants and the luxurious fabric a silent irony. Mr. Davies settled behind his large mahogany desk, his usual stern, businesslike demeanor replaced by an almost giddy excitement. "Julian, my boy," he began, leaning forward with his hands clasped on the desk. "Do you have any idea what just happened?" "No, of course you don't. You were in the zone. But I was watching. I was watching your entire performance get recorded on a dozen different phones. People are already talking. The clip is probably all over social media. A waiter, a brilliant violinist, it's a story. It's exactly the kind of thing that generates buzz. The kind of buzz money can't buy." He picked up his phone, his thumb swiping with practiced ease. "Look at this," he said, turning the screen toward Julian. It was a video of his performance, a shaky, slightly out-of-focus clip, but the music was unmistakable. The comments were already flooding in. "He's amazing. I've never heard anything like it. Who is this guy?" Julian felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. His secret, his quiet sanctuary was no longer his. It was a viral sensation, a piece of content to be consumed and discarded. Mr. Davies, completely oblivious to Julian's internal turmoil, continued with the breathless enthusiasm of a man who had just won the lottery. "This is a game-changer, Julian. For you and for this restaurant. The Gilded Cage is known for its atmosphere, its exclusivity. Now we'll be known for something else entirely. We'll be known for our resident artist. I have an offer for you. A new contract. We'll get you a proper uniform, a new title, resident violinist, and your salary will be generous. You'll perform 3 nights a week, 2 sets a night on the main stage. No more waiting tables. This is your chance, Julian. A life-changing chance." Julian listened, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. A better life. A decent salary. The freedom from having to serve people like Serafina Vance. It was everything he had ever wanted, everything he had worked for. And yet, the words felt hollow. The passion he had poured into his music, the profound connection he had with his instrument, was being reduced to a job description, a marketing gimmick. He thought of Mr. Elias, and the knot of anxiety in his stomach tightened. He remembered a day years ago in Mr. Elias's dusty living room. Julian had been frustrated with a difficult piece of music. His fingers ached, the notes were a tangled mess, and he was on the verge of tears. Mr. Elias, with his infinite patience, had stopped him. "Julian, stop," the old man had said, his voice as gentle as a morning breeze. "You're trying to play for the sheet music, for the perfect notes. You're trying to be someone else's idea of a good musician. But music isn't about that. It's about being honest. It's about telling your own story. You don't play to impress anyone, Julian. You play to speak to them heart to heart. If you play with a true heart, the skill will follow. Never let anyone tell you what your music should be for. It's for you. It's for your truth." Those words, once a comfort, were now a sharp accusation. Was he about to sell his truth for a paycheck? To play his heart's music for the same people who had so easily dismissed him? The applause, he now realized, had been intoxicating because it had been unexpected. It had been a surprise, a genuine moment of human connection. But if he became the resident violinist, would that surprise, that connection, still exist? Or would he simply become another one of the Gilded Cage's curated luxuries, a living, breathing part of the decor? He looked at Mr. Davies, whose smile was wide and expectant. "Mr. Davies, I appreciate the offer," Julian began, his voice a little shaky. "But I'm not a professional performer. I just play. It's for me, not for an audience." Mr. Davies' smile didn't waver. "Nonsense, Julian. All music is for an audience. That's what makes it art. The fact that you don't see yourself as a professional is exactly what makes you so compelling. We'll market you as a hidden gem, an authentic talent. This is your life's work, Julian. You've just been doing it for free until now." Julian felt a familiar exhaustion wash over him. He knew he couldn't convince Mr. Davies, who saw only dollar signs and marketing opportunities, not the sacred connection to his art. He needed a moment to think, to breathe, to reconcile the boy who played in a dusty living room with the man being offered a gilded cage of a different kind. Just as he was about to speak, the door to the office opened and the other violinist, the one he had returned the instrument to, peered inside. "Mr. Davies, I'm so sorry to interrupt," she said, her eyes fixed on Julian, "but I just wanted to tell Julian that I think his improvisation was one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. It's what music is supposed to be. It's what we all wish we could do every time we pick up a bow." Her voice was sincere, her praise a genuine balm to Julian's bruised soul. "My name's Lena, by the way," she added, offering Julian a small warm smile. Julian felt a flicker of hope. He wasn't alone in this. There was someone else in this suffocating world of wealth who understood the difference between a performance and a conversation. Mr. Davies, annoyed at the interruption, quickly dismissed her, but the seed of her words had been planted. Julian now had two paths before him. The golden one offered by Mr. Davies and a more uncertain, but potentially more fulfilling, path hinted at by Lena. He stood up, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. He didn't have an answer for Mr. Davies yet. All he knew was that he couldn't let his music become a lie, not after all the honesty Mr. Elias had taught him to find in it. He walked out of the office, the applause of the crowd and the promise of a new life battling for space in his mind with the quiet, earnest words of a kind old man and a new friend. Julian walked through the opulent restaurant, but he no longer felt invisible. Every look, every whisper, every lingering glance felt like a spotlight on his back. He moved with the quiet efficiency of a man trying to disappear, but the air around him crackled with a new kind of energy, the residue of a performance that had shattered the illusion of his place. He was no longer just the waiter, he was the waiter who played. The distinction was a heavy cloak he couldn't shed. He had to finish his shift, a final, awkward 2 hours of clearing plates and refilling water, his hands feeling clumsy and foreign after holding a bow. When the final patron had departed and the restaurant was just a vast, empty expanse of polished wood and silent tables, he finally headed for the back exit. As he pushed open the heavy service door, the cool night air was a welcome shock. He stepped out onto the grimy alleyway, the contrast between the restaurant's luxurious interior and the world behind it a jarring, familiar reality. The alley smelled of trash, stale beer and the exhaust from an idling truck. He took a deep breath, trying to clear his head, and reached for the worn headphones in his pocket. He just wanted to lose himself in his own music, in the private world he had built for himself. "Julian?" He turned, startled. Standing a few feet away, leaning against the brick wall, was Lena, the violinist. Her tuxedo was slightly rumpled, a stark contrast to the impeccable one she wore on stage. In the dim glow of a flickering utility light, her face was soft with genuine concern, not the curated sympathy he had seen on the faces of the patrons. "Oh," he said, taken aback. "Lena, right?" She nodded, pushing off the wall. "I wanted to catch you before you left. I hope that's okay. I couldn't just leave without talking to you. What happened tonight, it was incredible." She wasn't effusive, her tone was quiet and sincere. "I meant what I said in there. I've been playing in that restaurant for 3 years. I play the same pieces every night, the same sterile, polite music. It pays the bills. But what you did, that was music. It was real. It was honest." Julian felt a strange warmth spread through him. It was the first time since he had set foot in the gilded cage that someone had spoken to him like a human being, not a servant or a novelty. "Thank you," he said, the words feeling inadequate. I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," she replied with a small smile. "Just listen. Mr. Davies offered you a new job, didn't he? To be their resident violinist?" Julian nodded, the anxiety he had been holding in all night returning with a rush. "He did. It's a lot to process." "I know," she said, her expression hardening slightly. "He's an opportunist. He'll turn you into a gimmick. He'll want you to play the kind of music he thinks people want to hear. He'll make you play for the money, for the applause. Not for yourself." Julian's eyes widened. She had articulated the very fear that had been swirling in his mind. "How did you?" "I've been there," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Not with a viral video, but with the same promise. A golden opportunity. I took it. I gave up the music I loved for the security of a paycheck and a stage in a fancy restaurant. And I'm good at it. But every night I feel a little more of myself slipping away. Don't make the same mistake, Julian. Your music is too important for that." Her words were a lifeline in the darkness, a clear path through the fog of his confusion. He thought of Mr. Elias, and the old man's words about playing from the heart echoed in his mind. Never let anyone tell you what your music should be for. Lena wasn't telling him what to do, she was simply offering her own truth, a truth that resonated deeply with his own. "So what do I do?" Julian asked, the question a genuine plea. "I can't go back to being a waiter now. Not after this. But the offer is, it's a way out. A way to a better life." Lena reached into her violin case and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. "This is for you," she said, handing it to him. "It's my number. And it's the address of a small local music venue downtown. It's a place where artists go to play for themselves and for each other, not for people like Serafina Vance. They have an open mic night on Wednesdays. It's not the gilded cage. There's no big salary. But it's a place to start. A place to play your music your way with people who will actually hear it." He looked at the piece of paper, a simple, non-gilded map to a new possibility. The two paths Mr. Davies had laid out, the one to wealth and the one to artistic compromise, had just been joined by a third, unexpected option. A path of his own making with the support of a new friend. As he walked home, the city was a symphony of its own, a cacophony of car horns, distant laughter, and the steady, rhythmic pulse of life. He walked past the gleaming towers of the financial district, past the storefronts with their elegant window displays, and into his neighborhood, a world of brownstones and basketball courts, of corner bodegas and the smell of fried food. He felt a different kind of gaze here. Not the cold, assessing stare of the wealthy, but the genuine curiosity of his neighbors. A woman on her porch, an elderly man watering his plants, they all looked at him with a newfound interest. The viral video had already spread. He was no longer just Julian, the waiter from down the block. He was Julian, the violinist. The two worlds he had kept so separate were beginning to bleed into one another, and he knew that there was no going back to the man he was before tonight. He gripped the piece of paper in his hand, a tangible promise of a different future, and headed home, his mind made up. He wouldn't take Mr. Davies's offer. He would take the path Lena had shown him, the path of a true artist, and see where it led. The foundry smelled of sawdust and old coffee. The air was thick with a palpable warmth, a stark and welcome contrast to the sterile, perfumed chill of the gilded cage. The walls were unpainted brick, adorned with faded posters for local bands, and the furniture was a mismatched collection of chairs and small tables. A small stage at the front, lit by a single spotlight, held an open-backed acoustic guitar and a lonely microphone. Julian stood in the doorway, the small piece of paper Lena had given him clutched in his hand, a map to this new, unfamiliar world. He felt a different kind of anxiety here. It wasn't the fear of humiliation, but the tremor of stepping out from a hiding place he had occupied for so long. He spotted her instantly. Lena was seated in a corner, her violin case open on the floor beside her. She wasn't playing, but talking animatedly with a few other musicians, a loose, genuine smile on her face that he had never seen in the confines of the gilded cage. When she saw him, her smile widened and she beckoned him over. "Julian, I was hoping you'd come," she said, her voice a joyful surprise. "This is it, the foundry. It's not much, but it's where real music lives. These are my friends, Mark and Chloe. Julian shook their hands, his own feeling cold and clammy. Mark, a lanky guitarist with kind eyes, and Chloe, a drummer with a bright, infectious laugh, greeted him with an easy camaraderie. There was no pretense, no social hierarchy to navigate. They were just people who loved music, and in their presence, Julian felt a small piece of his armor fall away. "You've been the talk of the town, you know," Mark said, his smile genuine. "That video of you at the Gilded Cage, it's everywhere. You have a fan club, man." Julian felt a familiar flush of heat, but this time it was different. It wasn't the burning shame of being a spectacle, but the awkwardness of an unexpected celebrity. I just play," he said, the words feeling feeble. "No, you don't just play," Lena interjected, her tone firm but kind. "You make people feel something. And that's what we're all trying to do here. Tonight, you don't have to impress anyone. Just be you." She had managed to articulate the very core of his fear and his hope. Julian watched as a poet took the stage, his words weaving a quiet spell over the room. The audience listened, their faces attentive, their silence a shared appreciation, not a weapon. This was what music was supposed to be. It was a conversation, not a performance. When it was his turn, Julian walked to the stage, his cheap, worn violin a stark contrast to the elegant instrument he had held just a few nights before. As he tuned the strings, he caught Lena's eye from the audience. She gave him a small, encouraging nod, a silent promise of support. This wasn't about Serafina Vance or Mr. Davies. This was about honoring the memory of Mr. Elias, and the quiet truth he had found in the music all those years ago. He began to play, and the music that came from his violin was different from the whirlwind of emotion he had poured out at the Gilded Cage. This was a piece he had written for Mr. Elias, a slow, gentle melody that spoke of loss and gratitude. It was a humble, heartfelt tribute, a simple story of a kind old man and a hopeful boy. The sound filled the foundry, a quiet, resonant hush falling over the room. His fingers moved with a practiced ease, but the focus was on the feeling, the memory, the profound sense of connection to his past. When he finished, the applause was not the thunderous, shocked roar of the wealthy, but a warm, sustained clap that felt like a group hug. People were smiling, their eyes glistening. He saw Mark and Chloe give him a thumbs up, and Lena was standing, her face a portrait of pride. After his set, a small crowd gathered around him. They weren't asking about his viral video or his life at the Gilded Cage. They were asking about the music itself. That last part, where the melody shifts into a minor key, it was beautiful, one woman said, her eyes serious. It felt like a memory. Another man asked about his technique, a genuine inquiry from one musician to another. Julian felt a profound sense of belonging, a feeling he hadn't known was possible. Lena joined him, a cup of coffee in her hand. "You see," she said softly, "this is what it's for. This is why we do it. No gilded cages, no pretense. Just music and people who listen." "I think I'm starting to get it," Julian replied, a genuine smile on his face. He felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. His viral fame was still a strange, new reality, but here, in this room, it was secondary to the music itself. He had made his choice, and for the first time he knew it was the right one. The call to Mr. Davies was short and professional, but beneath the polite words, a storm was brewing. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Davies," Julian said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands, "but I'm going to have to decline. I want to pursue my music in a different way." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line, and then Mr. Davies's voice came through, dripping with an icy condescension that was far more chilling than his previous blustering enthusiasm. "A different way? You're a waiter, Julian. A waiter with a hobby. This was your one and only chance to escape that life. You think you can just play in some grimy club and become a star? You're a fool. You're throwing away a six-figure salary for a pipe dream. Don't come crawling back when you realize what you've done." The line went dead. Julian hung up the phone, a profound sense of relief washing over him. The finality of the decision was both terrifying and liberating. The Gilded Cage had been offered, and he had chosen freedom, even if that freedom came with a price tag of uncertainty. His days quickly fell into a new rhythm. He was no longer waking before dawn to catch a bus to the city. Instead, he spent his mornings practicing, the old violin a constant companion. He and Lena had become inseparable, a duo of kindred spirits. She helped him find work teaching private lessons to a handful of students, a modest but meaningful income that allowed him to focus on his art. Their afternoons were spent at the foundry, where they would share ideas, critique each other's music, and talk for hours about their favorite composers and their dreams. He had found a mentor, an ally, and a true friend in Lena, a person who understood the profound, sacred nature of his music. The viral video, however, refused to fade away. It had taken on a life of its own, morphing from a moment of public humiliation into a symbol of artistic defiance. The comments were no longer just praise, they were an outpouring of emotion from people who saw themselves in his story. "This is for all the hidden talents," one read. "He's a genius," another wrote. "The look on that woman's face is everything," a third quipped. Interviews came, first from small online blogs, then from local news channels. Julian, coached by Lena, navigated the media with a quiet dignity, always steering the conversation back to the music itself and the memory of Mr. Elias. Meanwhile, in her glass tower overlooking the city, Serafina Vance watched his rise with a cold, simmering fury. The viral video, once a source of her own perverse entertainment, was now a constant, humiliating reminder of her miscalculation. Every time the video's view count climbed, every time a new article popped up praising the waiter violinist, she felt a fresh stab of indignation. It wasn't just that he was successful, it was that his success was a direct result of her attempt to ridicule him. He had turned her weapon against her, and the world was celebrating him for it. His rejection of the Gilded Cage's offer was the final insult, a public declaration that he was better than the world she ruled. She began to make calls, pulling strings, using her considerable influence to try and subtly poison his reputation. She planted articles in small tabloid-style publications, calling him an opportunist, a one-trick pony, and a charlatan who had manipulated a moment of kindness for fame. But the articles fell flat, unable to stand up against the sheer, undeniable honesty of his music. Serafina Vance, accustomed to a world where her word was law, was shocked to discover that Julian's art was a force she couldn't control. One evening, as Julian and Lena were packing up after a performance at the foundry, a woman with kind eyes and a sharp, discerning gaze approached them. She wore a simple, elegant dress, and her presence commanded a quiet authority. "Julian?" she asked, her voice soft but clear. "My name is Eleanor Sterling. I'm the director of the Symphony Hall Orchestra here in the city. I was at the Gilded Cage that night. I saw you play. And I have been following your story ever since." Julian's heart hammered against his ribs. Lena, standing beside him, gripped his arm, a silent signal to stay calm. "That night, you didn't just play a piece of music," Eleanor continued, her eyes fixed on him with a kind of reverence. "You played a piece of your soul. It's a rarity, a gift. We are looking for a new first-chair violinist for our orchestra. Our previous one just retired. It's a difficult role to fill. But after hearing you, after seeing the way you speak to your instrument, I believe you are exactly what we need. We'd like you to audition." Julian was speechless. The Gilded Cage had offered him a stage to be a spectacle. The viral video had made him a symbol. But Eleanor Sterling was offering him something else entirely, a place among the greats, a chance to lend his voice to a choir of true artists, and a place where his music would be valued for its raw, unfiltered truth. It was the antithesis of everything Serafina Vance stood for, the ultimate refutation of her gilded world. Julian stood outside the grand doors of the Symphony Hall, the weight of his violin case in his hand feeling both immense and light. The marble steps were cool beneath his worn shoes, and the air, crisp with the scent of autumn, held a different kind of promise than the polluted alleys of his neighborhood. This place was a temple, a sacred space where the air itself seemed to vibrate with a century of music. Julian felt a profound sense of awe, but also a quiet certainty that had been missing from his life. He was no longer the waiter pretending to be a violinist. He was Julian, the violinist, here to speak his truth. He looked at Lena, who had accompanied him. She gave him a gentle, encouraging squeeze on the shoulder. "You've got this," she said, her smile a beacon of genuine support. "Just remember what we talked about. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest." He nodded, her words a soothing mantra. She was right. This wasn't a performance for Mr. Davies' amusement or a show of defiance for Serafina Vance. This was a conversation between him and his music, a moment to honor the old man who had taught him to listen. Inside, the audition room was a vast, empty expanse. The stage was set with a few simple chairs, and at a long table in the front row, Eleanor Sterling sat with two other stern-faced individuals. The room was intimidating, but Julian reminded himself of the feeling of the foundry, of the warmth and shared passion. He took a deep breath and took his place in the center of the stage, the single spotlight his only company. "Good morning, Mr. Vance," Eleanor said, her voice clear and resonant. "Thank you for coming. We'd like you to start with the Mozart." She gestured to the sheet music on a stand beside him. Julian, however, shook his head. "With all due respect, Miss Sterling," he said, his voice a little shaky but firm, "I'd like to play something of my own. Something from my heart." Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly, a flicker of surprise in her eyes, but she simply nodded. "As you wish." The other two members of the panel exchanged a skeptical look. Julian closed his eyes. He didn't see the symphony hall anymore. He saw Mr. Elias's living room, bathed in the golden light of a setting sun. He saw the worn-out music book, the cheap, cracked violin, the calloused hands of a man who saw potential where no one else did. He began to play, not with a flourish or a grand opening, but with a single sustained note that seemed to hang in the air, a question mark of sound. Then came the melody, a story he had composed over countless late nights, a tapestry woven from the memories of his life. The music was a journey. It started with a quiet, sorrowful theme, the lament of a boy growing up in a world of limited options. Then it picked up pace, a frantic, hopeful rhythm that spoke of his dreams, of the allowance he saved for lessons, of the hours he spent practicing in secret. The melody soared and dipped, a beautiful, tragic dance of a young man fighting for a life he believed he deserved. The sound was raw, unfiltered, and deeply personal. It was the sound of his truth. He played with a fire in his soul that transcended technique and training. His fingers moved with a practiced grace, but it was his heart that guided them, pouring every ounce of his experience into the magnificent sound. As he reached the crescendo, a powerful, triumphant flourish that seemed to fill every corner of the vast hall, the heavy doors at the back of the room creaked open. A shadow fell across the floor, and in the distance, Julian saw a woman in an elegant power suit, her face a mask of shock and fury. Serafina Vance. She had come to watch him fail, to see him crumble under pressure, a final attempt to reclaim her pride. But she was too late. He was already soaring, a melody of his own carrying him high above her reach. When the final note faded, the silence was once again deafening, but this time, it was filled with the profound sense of a story concluded. Julian opened his eyes and the room rushed back into focus. The two other panel members were staring at him with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Eleanor Sterling, however, had tears in her eyes. She stood up, her applause the first sound to break the silence. "That was beautiful," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I haven't heard a piece of music so honest in my life. It was a masterpiece. And you, Julian Vance, are exactly who we have been looking for. The position is yours." Julian felt his knees buckle, a flood of emotions washing over him. The poverty, the ridicule, the years of quiet struggle, it all culminated in this moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. He had not just gotten a job, he had found his home. He had honored the memory of Mr. Elias and in doing so, had found his own truth. As he walked off the stage, his head held high, he passed Serafina Vance, who stood frozen in the doorway. She tried to catch his eye, to say something, but Julian simply looked through her, a phantom of impeccable service no more. He had his own stage now, a stage where his truth was all that mattered, and the gilded cage he had so long been trapped in was finally, irrevocably shattered. His journey as a waiter was over. His life as an artist had just begun. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video.